It's been more than 2 decades. Professor Reddy is guiding researchers, scholars in the academic field, in the public policy, and then how like people should focus on the public administration governance sector. And one more thing, Professor Reddy is also the key advisor to the Bharatiya Samvad Kendra, and then one of the key personnel for the our strategic partner, as a strategic partner, the Central University of Andhra Pradesh, particular Department of Political Science, as we are moving forward for the establishment of the Center of Excellence for the Sustainable Livelihood Research under Professor Reddy's guidance at the Ananthapuramu district in the Central University of Andhra Pradesh. So I would like to request Professor for today's discussion, please enlighten us for this topic, and from the rural roots to urban challenges, and integrating the research into the policy for sustainable livelihood. Thank you so much, Professor. Please.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Raman, and thank you, Purti, for the kind introduction. And dear friends who have joined online, I think there are many young friends also, UG students and research scholars, I believe. Very good evening to all of you. I'm very pleased to be associated with Bharat Samvad Policy Dialogue Series. And in fact, the topic that has given to me is quite challenging. And Mr. Raman has given a concept note in which he has suggested areas of coverage. If you look at the 5 areas of coverage which he has given to me, each area, could be one lecture. But the challenge before me is how best I can make sense to you all by comprehensively presenting my perspective. With this topic, that is from rural roots to urban challenges, integrating research into policy for sustainable livelihoods. It's a very pertinent topic and very contemporary topic which needs discussion, wherein I would like to focus upon what exactly a rural area means and what are the basic characteristics of rural and urban areas, and what is this rural-urban continuum, and what are the challenges of migration, and what do we experience when there is a lot of informal labor in urban area, and what are the gaps in livelihood security, and also in public services, and what gaps you find in rural areas and what gaps you find in urban areas, and how best we can integrate research into policy. That is where the organizations like Bharatiya, Neeti, Samvad, Kendra come into picture, and they are doing a very, I should say, meaningful exercise by organizing such talks and having interactions with young scholars and students. Now, when we talk about from rural roots to urban challenges, all over, there have been global discussions around engendering policies and developmental approaches to tackle both urbanization and rural development simultaneously. But I have to say that urban and rural areas can mean different things to different people, and the meaning can vary from country to country and sometimes within countries. Now, for a basic understanding, to some of the young students who have joined us, if I have to tell some basic characteristics of rural and urban areas, in terms of economic activity, urban areas, as we all know, are dominated by industry, services with high population density, compared to rural areas which are dominated by agriculture, mostly dependent on natural resources, with low density of population. But there is a rural-urban continuum, such as towns with both farming and light industry. So what is this continuum about? I'll come to it a bit later. And as far as social characteristics are concerned, Urban areas have greater diversity, faster pace of life, of course, with better infrastructure and services. And comparatively or relatively, rural societies, they are close-knit communities with slower pace of life and less access to service. And this continuum areas or the intermediate zones have a mix. Example, like towns with sub-urban amenities but rural traditions. And the land use also changes gradually from dense buildings in urban areas to open farmlands in rural areas. So people often move along this continuum, such as rural residents commuting to cities or urban dwellers really relocating to small towns or to the outskirts. It is in this context the discussion on rural-urban continuum becomes imperative and important. When we talk of rural-urban continuum, the rural-urban continuum implies the gradual and interconnected nature of rural and urban areas, rather than seeing them as completely separate or opposing categories. It emphasizes that there is no sharp boundary between the rural and the urban. Instead, there is a spectrum where the characteristics blend and overlap. Understanding this continuum helps governments and planners address development, transportation, housing, and resource needs more effectively. Now we need to be clear about what are the challenges of rural out migration and urban informal sector. The challenges of rural out migration and the growth of urban informal labor sector are deeply connected and reflect broader issues in economic development, urban planning, and social protection. Let us look at the challenges of rural out migration. There is depopulation of rural areas. Young and productive individuals leave, often leaving aging populations, and there are labor shortages in agriculture. Then there is loss of human capital. Skilled or educated individuals leave, hindering rural development and innovation. There is breakdown of family and social structures. Migrants often leave behind children and elderly family members, leading to social strain and reduced scale. There's also an aspect of gender imbalance because men migrate more frequently, which can increase the burden on women left behind to manage farms and households. While the remittances sent help financially, rural economies become dependent on them instead of building local livelihoods. And this also results in environmental degradation because abandoned land or unsustainable use due to labor shortages can hurt long-term rural sustainability. Now, what are the challenges of urban informal labor? The urban informal sector includes, or the informal sector in urban areas include jobs not regulated or protected by the state. Example, street vendors, casual laborers, domestic workers, etc. Now, what are the key challenges? The key challenges are there is lack of job security. Informal workers can be fired at any time with no contracts or protections. There is no proper social protection because most do not have health insurance, pensions, or unemployment benefits. And most of them have low and unstable income. Earnings are often below minimum wage and vary from day to day. And they are exposed to poor working conditions because informal jobs can be hazardous with little oversight for safety or rights. And there is also overcrowding and resulting in urban poverty. The influx of migrants can strain housing, transportation, sanitation, and health systems. So, what I mean to say is the upward mobility is limited. Few pathways exist for education, training, or transition to formal employment. In this context, how do you assess gaps both in livelihood security and public services? The gaps in livelihood security and public services between rural and urban regions are quite significant and multifaceted. These disparities they stem from differences in infrastructure, governance, access to opportunities, and socio-economic development. If we have to talk about this livelihood security gaps in rural areas, there is a lot of agricultural dependency. Most rural households, they depend on agriculture, which is often seasonal, rain-fed, and vulnerable to climate change. Also, there is lack of diversification. Few opportunities outside farming, limited access to skilled jobs or industrial employment. This high reliance on informal economy and with low paying jobs and no job security or social protection, as I mentioned before. So there are also migration pressures because hence the migration, youth often migrate to cities for better opportunities and due to weakening rural economies. Then when you talk of urban areas, of course, there is job competition. Urban labor markets are saturated, and especially with unskilled labor leading to underemployment. And you find a lot of informal settlements. Many urban poor work in insecure informal sectors like domestic help, street vending, without benefits of protection. There is also social inequality as their sharp divide exists between wealthy and poor urban populations. Now coming to gaps in public services. In rural areas, healthcare, education, water and sanitation, connectivity, all these areas are not very well developed. You find inadequate facilities, shortage of doctors and medicines, and poor healthcare infrastructure. And education is also of not very good quality. There are high dropout rates. There are lack of teachers and basic infrastructure. In some rural areas, you can see one teacher managing 1 to 5 classes. Imagine every class has few subjects, right? For 5 to 6 subjects, and one teacher managing all 1 to 5 classes. So the same is limited access to piped water, toilets, and waste management. And poor road and internet connectivity also hinders to market and information. And what is urban experience? When you talk of urban experience, there is overburdened services like slums and informal settlements. They suffer from inadequate water supply, sanitation, waste disposal, and overcrowded healthcare and schools. In the district where I am living in Ananthapuramu, every day when I come to office, there is so much of waste or garbage lying on both sides of the roads. So we have even complained to many municipal authorities. So I often wonder how to, they say that the citizens need to be sensitized, but a sensitized citizen reports or brings to the notice of authorities. The authorities are also reluctant to take action. So they keep postponing. So this is the state of affairs in in medium towns. You can imagine the case in very highly populated towns, Then there is pollution, poor air and water quality, and lack of green spaces in low-income urban zones. All these things, they further exacerbate the situation. There are also infrastructural gaps, that is uneven distribution of public infrastructure between affluent and poor neighborhoods. There's a vast difference in urban areas. So with this, if we have to understand what are the policy and governance gaps, when we talk of policy and governance gaps, we need to look at often targeting and delivery. Many welfare schemes, as we all know, they don't succeed, or they may fail due to poor implementation, corruption, or lack of awareness. And even resource allocation is a problem. Urban areas receive more resources while rural areas are often underfunded. And what about the governance structures? How effective are the governance structures in both rural panchayat and urban municipalities? So much depends upon their functioning. Of course, are they equipped fully? When we say, are they equipped fully? There are 3 F's which are very, very important: funds, functions, and functionaries. So are the local governance structures having the requisite funds, functions, and functionaries? This matters a lot, whether it is rural panchayat or urban municipalities. Now, how can we address these gaps? We can address these gaps through large-scale investments in rural infrastructure, that is roads, internet, irrigation facilities, which of course the present government policies are heading in the right direction, and promoting non-farm employment and rural entrepreneurship, strengthening primary health care and schooling in undeserved areas, and using technology and mobile delivery systems for better access to public services. Of course, in this regard, we have improved considerably in the past decade with, how best we are leveraging technology. India is a case in point, and India stands out as far as technology is being used for better access to public services. Then, urban planning reforms to include slum upgrades and infrastructure for the urban poor. Now, let us talk a bit about displacement patterns among tribal and marginalized communities. These patterns too vary significantly between urban and rural regions, driven by a complex mix of developmental, economic, environmental, and socio-political forces. Displacement of tribal and marginalized communities in rural India often result from large-scale development projects such as dams, mining, and infrastructure development. These projects can lead to loss of land, livelihoods, and cultural heritage, particularly affecting scheduled tribes and other traditional forest dwellers. I'll just talk about 2 things as far as displacement due to development projects is concerned. For example, the Sardar Sarovar Dam, spanning Gujarat, Maharashtra, and Madhya Pradesh, has been a significant source of displacement of over 41,000 families, with 56% being Adivasis, that is, indigenous populations. This project has faced criticism for inadequate rehabilitation, not for the project, but for inadequate rehabilitation and compensation, leading to prolonged struggles for displaced communities. Then the Polavaram project in Andhra Pradesh, a multi-purpose irrigation and power project, is expected to displace 276 villages, which will affect more than 44,000 families, half of whom are tribals. So the project has been controversial due to its environmental impact and the submergence of archaeological sites. Let us talk about the Forest Right Act 2006 to understand legal framework and challenges. This FRA, that is the Forest Right Act, recognizes the rights of forest dwelling communities to land and resources. It mandates that communities must be consulted and their rights recognized before displacement. However, as it is evident, implementation has been consistent, with many communities reporting inadequate recognition of their rights and lack of consultation. While development projects are essential for national growth, they often disproportionately affect tribal and marginalized communities. Ensuring that these communities' rights are recognized and upheld is crucial for achieving equitable and sustainable development. There is a need for stricter enforcement of existing laws and greater accountability in planning and execution of such projects. Even the case of conservation and forestry policies, the creation of wildlife sanctuaries, national parks, or eco-sensitive zones has led to forced evictions in the name of conservation. So tribal people, despite their traditional symbiotic relationship with the forests, are sometimes seen as encroachers. Besides, poor returns from agriculture, erratic monsoons, and land degradation, they push marginalized rural families to migrate or be displaced over time. This is often economic displacement rather than physical eviction. So whether it is physical eviction or economic displacement, what is the impact of such displacement? There is loss of traditional livelihoods and cultural identity, sometimes inadequate or no compensation or rehabilitation, migration to cities in search of menial jobs, feeding into the urban informal economy. In urban contexts, marginalized and tribal communities face displacement due to slum demolitions and urban redevelopment. Many urban poor live in informal settlements without tenure rights. Smart city projects, infrastructure expansion, and beautification drives, they often evict them, sometimes without notice or adequate alternatives. All this is necessary. The development is necessary, projects are necessary, but the rehabilitation policy needs to be addressed. Otherwise, there will be all these problems or concerns which we are experiencing. As cities expand, the real estate speculation, it just aggravates and pushes out the urban poor from central areas to the fringes. Displacement is economic as rents rise beyond affordability. Poorly built housing in floodplains, coastal areas, or low-lying zones often face recurrent climate-related displacement, like example, floodings, like cyclones, etc. What is the result? The result is disruption of social support networks, and marginalized communities are resettled in peripheral zones with poor access to jobs, schools, and healthcare. So there is increased vulnerability to poverty cycles. So against this background, there is a need to integrate research into policy. This involves translating scientific findings and evidences into actionable strategies. This is where bridging academia and administration is very, very important. If we do not have actionable strategies, the research will not serve the purpose. Only such actionable strategies can help ensure that policies are effective, efficient, and grounded in the best available knowledge. So what needs to be done to integrate research into policy? First, identify policy-relevant research questions. Align research objectives with current policy needs or gaps. Collaborate with policy makers early in the research process to ensure relevance. Secondly, how we are engaging stakeholders. Include policymakers, practitioners, and affected communities throughout the research cycle. It is important to use stakeholder feedback to shape research design and implementation. Third is, how do we communicate? Are we translating complex findings into clear, concise, and policy-friendly formats like policy briefs, executive summaries, use infographics, visualizations, and storytelling to convey the impact? Fourth is establish knowledge intermediaries or think tank or organization like yours. Employ individuals or organizations that bridge the gap between researchers and policymakers. These help interpret, contextualize, and disseminate findings. And building long-term relationships, that is, foster trust between researchers and policymakers through regular engagement and mutual understanding. And for that, participation in advisory boards, working groups, or joint forums is very, very important. I think Bharatiya Neeti Samvad Kendra is heading in this direction and definitely make a mark in times to come. Then use timely and relevant evidence. Ensure that findings are available when policy decisions are being made. That means provide real-time or rapid evidence during crisis or pressing issues. Then, lastly, how do we institutionalize evidence use and evaluate impact? When we talk of institutionalizing evidence use, embed research utilization into policy processes through guidelines, frameworks, or mandates, and training policy makers in evidence appraisal and use is also crucial. When you talk about evaluating impact, it is necessary to monitor and assess how research-informed policies perform and use findings to refine both policy and future research directions. It is here I would like to talk a bit about role of data, grassroots surveys, and evidence-based decision making. Data, grassroots surveys, and evidence-based decision making are, of course, crucial and critical components of effective policy making, program design, and implementation, especially in the context of governance, development, and public service delivery. If we have to talk about data, reliable data enables planners and decision makers to understand current conditions, trends, and gaps in services or development. Data helps track the progress of initiatives, measure outcomes, and evaluate impact. And public access to data enhances, which is very important, trust in institutions and promotes accountability. Now with big data and AI, there can be predictive analysis. Governments and organizations can anticipate future needs, risks, or crises. Now, let us also discuss something about role of grassroots surveys. Why grassroots surveys are very, very important? They promote contextual understanding. Grassroots surveys, they provide localized ground level insights that may not be visible through national data sets. They foster community engagement because surveys that involve local populations foster participation and trust, improving policy acceptance. They also help identifying hidden issues. Local surveys can reveal informal economies, social norms, or marginalized voices often missed in top-down data collection. They help in designing tailored interventions, that is, solutions based on local needs and aspirations are more likely to succeed. How do institutional models of participatory governance and decentralized planning help? I talked a bit about this earlier. These are frameworks through which citizens actively engage in decision-making processes, especially at local levels, and aim to enhance democracy, accountability, and efficiency in governance. And what do these governance structures advocate? They should advocate a sustainable livelihoods framework. Sustainable livelihoods in a policy framework refers to the integration of sustainability principles into government or institutional policies that aim to improve the well-being of individuals and communities, particularly in the context of poverty, vulnerability, or environmental stress. It emphasizes not just income generation, but the long-term viability of people's means of living in harmony with environment and social equity. So when we talk of sustainable livelihoods framework, therefore, urban-rural linkages and rural-urban linkages have been promoted as a strategy for advancing development on the urban-rural continuum. Now the question is, why an urban-rural linkage framework is needed? It is unlikely that urban migration will ever decrease. Rural people are likely to face land dispossession either through statutory or illegal ways. So landlessness is expected to increase owing to land conversion and legal and unlawful disposition of land occurring within and at the intersection of urban and rural areas. So it is necessary to shift development thinking from a focus on the rural-urban divide to one that promotes urban-rural connections. It is also vital to replace traditional development approaches with inclusive practices that embrace the peri-urban areas. That is, the peri-urban areas constitute land that connects urban and rural fringes and are the physical manifestation of direct urban-rural linkages. So there is need for urgent action to tackle urbanization. However, rural areas should not become land areas that cities use to fulfill urban objectives. In this context, there is a need for interdependent development, a development that mutually benefits both urban and rural areas. Now, the common concern is urban and rural divide. The urban and rural divide leads to uneven development between urban and rural areas and encourages more inequality. Uneven development happens when urban and rural areas are disconnected in terms of land policy and planning. That is, one, the urban develops in isolation from the other, the rural. So interdependent development can be described as a balanced development because it emphasizes functions that encourage rural-urban relations. Urban-rural areas have more in common now than ever before. They face similar socio-economic and environmental problems that require identical planning and policy solutions. For millions of people in rural-urban transition, it is the non-farm jobs pursued in the nearby town and distant urban markets that now provide alternative livelihoods. From the perspective of food security, this livelihood change also means that agriculture's capacity as a source of income and food provisioning has decreased significantly for a large majority of Indian households. Indeed, the available research shows that there exists a disconnect between agriculture and nutrition in India. It is important to note that despite growing pressure on farm-based livelihoods in India, many households hold on to land as a source of security, and agriculture still forms a part of a broad livelihood portfolio. But land and agriculture no longer adequately meet household food and nutrition. So people shift occupations. Why people shift occupations? Occupational shift and livelihood diversification are indicators of both an upward moving dynamic society as well as the presence of livelihood stress. Livelihood diversification happens, please understand this carefully, when rural families construct a diverse portfolio of activities and social support capabilities in order to survive and improve their standard of living without leaving the main occupation. In contrast, when households make a long-term shift in their main occupation, it is called an occupational shift. Both shift as well as diversification, that is occupational shift as well as diversification, they can happen due to pull factors, that is facilitating factors, or push factors that are stress factors. People shift occupations when the present occupation stops being rewarding or the households acquire new skills and enter the high-paying sectors. Though occupational shift and diversification are different phenomena, both are influenced by similar factors. Building on sustainable livelihoods approach, it is important to address four interrelated questions. This is food for thought for all of you. First, what is the extent of occupational shifts out of agriculture? This cannot be answered like this. This needs considerable research. Second, what new kinds of livelihoods are being forged? Third, what is the role of migration in present day livelihood strategies of households? Fourth, what are the ramifications for the well-being of the involved populations? Now, if we have to contextualize India's rural-urban transition, India has witnessed three major escalating trends in the last couple of decades that together sketch the contours of the country's wide-ranging rural-urban transition and the ways in which this transition conditions changing livelihoods. The first refers to the substantial and ongoing shift of employment out of the agriculture. The second trend pertains to rapid urban growth at the bottom of the urban system, with rural villages turning into urban classified settlements at unprecedented rates. And the third relates to significant increases in labor migration. Now, when we have to talk about sustainable livelihoods approach, which is crucial for tackling the concerns and challenges of rural areas and urban areas, I think both comprehensively need to focus on 5 types of assets, which the frameworks talks about. That is human capital. This refers to the skills, knowledge, health, and abilities of individuals, including their capacity for learning and adaptation. Social capital. This encompasses the networks, relationships, and social connections that individuals and communities have, which can provide support, access to resources and opportunities. Then natural capital, that is the natural resources which are available to individuals and communities, such as land, water, forests, and biodiversity, which are essential for production and livelihoods. Physical capital, this refers to the tangible assets that people own and use, such as tools, equipment, infrastructure, and housing, which enable them to produce goods and services. And the last is financial capital. This includes financial resources such as cash, savings, credit, and access to financial services that individuals and communities can use to invest in their livelihoods. So these 5 assets are crucial for individuals and communities to achieve long-term well-being and resilience. These 5 types of assets are interconnected and play a vital role in building sustainable livelihoods. So, it is important for research to explore the synergy and convergence as far as the concerns and challenges are concerned, both in rural areas and urban areas, and understand the rural-urban continuum so as to give real inputs to the policy makers for a comprehensive and holistic development of the regions. With this, I stop. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am, for guiding us today on this topic, how we can connect, how we can bridge the research into the policy making. And I would like to request the audience, if anybody has any questions, please ask. And we have assistant professor level faculties as well in the audience. Professor Vikram is there. And please, anybody has any question, please ask. Anybody, please. You may raise your hands and unmute yourself and can ask. Okay. Okay. So it's very quite technical and quite people had to understand like how we can.
But you have given such a topic.
Yes, yes, yes. We are thankful for your insights, like how it's really very deep, and then how to shape the policies and how to bridge the academic knowledge and how to bridge the gap between the researcher and policymaker. This is the need of the time, and as you
Yes.
about the assets, and this is totally leading towards the holistic development of the community, the particularly so that we can focus on the connecting both sector, urban and rural, for the balanced development. Thank you so much. Yes, Tusti Sharma has any question, please. Tusti, please ask.
Am I audible, sir?
You're audible, please.
Okay. First of all, very good evening, everybody. Ma'am, I joined late. I would love to know that what was the insight of the session, and I would like to know if you could give one summary, or one of those important pointers that you would like to explain out of this session.
You want me to give a summary?
Yes, ma'am.
Please.
If that's possible for you, anyhow.
Yeah. I tried to I initially started with what are the basic characteristics of rural areas and urban areas. And I explained what is rural urban continuum, which has both traditional roots or features of rural areas and the developed features of urban areas. And understanding this rural continuum is very crucial for policy makers to address the concerns. And I also talked about what are the challenges of rural out migration and the urban informal sector, and how this can what prompts rural out migration. And when the people migrate, it is naturally a stress on the urban area, and how the urban area, what are the things it should keep in mind to tackle the concerns of the urban informal labor, and what are the livelihood security gaps and public services gaps in public services. So the challenges in urban areas are different and rural areas are different, and how best you can integrate research into policy. When we talk of integrating research into policy, there is a whole set of stakeholders who have to be involved, and how this stakeholder engagement can really make a difference, and what is the role of data, and most importantly, how crucial it is to have grassroots surveys instead of totally relying on national data sets, and how data can foster evidence-based policy making, and what is the role of decentralized governance structures, whether it is rural urban governance or rural local governance or urban local governance. When we talk of decentralized structures, of course, we do have 73rd and 74th constitutional amendments, which have given constitutional status to both rural governance structures and the urban governance structures. But, there are some things which we need to look into, whether these governance structures are equipped with requisite funds, functions, and functionaries. Without these things, they cannot really make a difference, because panchayat is a state subject, and the article says that state may endow such powers. So may endow has made all the difference. Some states have devolved more powers. Some states have not devolved all the powers. So the devolution is not uniform, but the structures are uniform. So how best these decentralized structures can make a difference, that matters a lot. And when you talk of sustainable livelihood framework, I talked about 5 assets. That is, human capital, social capital, natural capital, physical capital, financial capital, which are very interconnected. You cannot deal with them in isolation. So these we need to work out the synergy and convergence so as to visualize or plan for a comprehensive and holistic development. This is very in very brief. On these things I talked about in my address.
Oh, thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much.
And how to bridge, of course, academia and administration. So research, it should give actionable strategies. What is happening is research, it's just not just for publication, just for improving my credentials, but actually how it is translating into action on ground really matters. That gap persists. How best we can build that and work out actionable strategies is the most important, point that we all as academicians, students, scholars, all of you should bear in mind. And of course, Bharatiya Neeti Samvad Kendra is moving in the right direction. And Mr. Raman and Ms. Poonam Kumari, they are very quite dynamic and enthusiastic. I think he has been pursuing me for this lecture, and I had to postpone also because I was hard pressed for time. Even today, the day was very hectic, but I thought I promised Mr. Raman and I should not go back on my word.
Thank you so much. We know there's a tight schedule. You are already so much engaged in so much activities, and I think this today's discussion gave us a new ideas and how we can focus on the bridging the research with the policies, and then how we can analyze the current policies and what gaps are existing in the current policies, and we can move forward for the bringing the philosophical and sociological aspect in our research, whatever we are going to do in the future. And
maybe if you give some time to me, I can give a brief of this, my talk, if you want, if you need it. I don't know,
Aman sir, may I just ask one question to ma'am?
Please, Vikramji, please.
Yes, ma'am, thank you very much for this enriching session. Ma'am, I just want to know, whenever we frame any policy, most of the time we also rely on some models from the foreign countries. So, considering this issue, can we have some good policy in the foreign country which may we rely upon, or any state of the India which has made some vibrant policy on this issue?
Yes. See, always as a student of public administration, first thing we need to remember is government administration is contextual, governance is contextual. Governance is a response to a specific socio-political setting. Okay. So we say often, we need to think globally, but you should act locally. So it is important to understand, as you said, models. There are many good models, but we cannot have, we need to have local solutions to local problems, and we cannot have globalized solutions to local problems. To be more specific, the model may be, see, if you take a program like NREGA, within a country like India, the program, it is very successful in few states. It's not so very successful in few states. The research reveals that. So the program is the same. The structure is the same. So how it goes on down the line and how it gets implemented or executed matters a lot. So the model may be very good. We need to draw lessons from the model. there cannot be one just good model. Even within a country, what works at one place may not work at another place. So the most important in models is the replicability of the model, the adaptability of the model. So we can draw lessons from the model and customize it to our situation, what best suits to our situation. Then we can, take the best out of the model instead of just replicating the model. So that is why they say there is no one size fits for all in governance. Governance is contextual and it varies from context to context. Yeah, that is what my answer would.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you.
I want to add here, ma'am, Professor Vikramaditya Rathod is currently assistant professor in the ILS Law Police Pune, and also a part of the program for the Maharashtra State Public Service Commissions who are currently being selected for this session. So,
Nice.
part of the upcoming policy makers in the in Maharashtra state. So,
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
yeah. Anybody else who has any questions, please?
I think it's already.
So, ma'am, anything, please, you want to say?
Anything nice, Mr. Raman? Thank you for the opportunity. It was great sharing my perspective. I think I made some sense to all of you.
Definitely, Professor.
Yeah. So look forward to working with you, and hope we will meet soon in Ananthapur.
Yes, definitely, Professor. We are coming soon in the Ananthapur to focus on our Center for Excellence for the Sustainable Livelihood Research. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you, all of you. I take your leave. Thank you for attending the session. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.